Ladies and gents, welcome to Richard Grannon and Friends. I'm here today with Mr. Shaun Attwood. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, cheers, man.
Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
This is a different Shaun Attwood for me because I've been interviewed by you a couple of times, and obviously I know who you are, but because of my own past, I avoided looking into yours through fear, basically, because I was scared, to be honest. And also, like, the whole true crime genre, it kind of freaks me out a little bit. And I know you've interviewed like the names in that scene, and people from Liverpool have said to me, why don't you interview this guy or that guy, or even lads that I used to work for? And I'm always like, I don't feel very good afterwards. I find it all a bit disturbing. I read 3 of your books, not cover to cover, but read parts of 3 of your books. And yeah, it was very traumatic, Shaun. I have to be honest with you. It's quite a story. For the people who are watching who might not know you yet, could you tell us a bit about your background and what you're known for?
Yes, I went university here in Liverpool, did business studies.
That's where it all went wrong. That's the beginning of the end.
Started partying at the State.
Oh, yeah.
Quadrant Park.
Yeah.
Toxteth Scrapyard.
Well, see, that Scouse naughtiness got into you, isn't it?
This was like 89, 90. I left in 91.
Yeah.
Witness lad. I lived at home during uni because, you know, everything was so nice with my parents, lovely people. Yeah. And I got into this economics in the stock market at a very young age.
Yeah.
Like, weirdly, looking back now, a lad from Witness to get interested in the stock market, you know, working class, chemical manufacturing town. And I went to my dad because they were advertising British telecom privatisation on the TV. I went to my dad, will you give us 50 quid to invest in this? He's like, bugger off, I'm not a Tory. I'm not a bloody Tory. Who do you think I am, your nan? A light bulb went off over my head, then me nan.
Right.
So I ran down to me nan's house. I said, Nan, I want to invest in this. I was only 16. And she gave me 50 quid. It doubled on the first day of dealings.
Wow.
So I went to Witness Library, ordered dozens of books on the stock market. And then my thing was, I've got to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30.
Right.
Otherwise I'm going to kill myself.
Okay.
That's how mercenary I was. Yeah.
It was a samurai vow. I will commit seppuku if I haven't achieved my goals by this time. I love it. So what was it that attracted you to the stock market at such a young age?
When I started economics, and it was called St. Joe's back then in Widnes, St. Peter's and Paul now, I had this teacher called Mr. Dillon, and only 6 of us chose it, and he saw I had an aptitude for it. So he would give me lessons on my own, like in the lunch hour, whatever. He'd be explaining all the numbers in the Financial Times, the share price highs, lows, all that kind of stuff. And then I just made my investment because it was getting advertised. And it went from my parents not putting any money in because they weren't bloody Tories. So I had every family member putting money in.
Right.
And even opening accounts in like various names because you would only get so many shares per application.
Right.
So if you had like 10 different names, you were going to get a lot of shares. Well, for a kid, it was a lot of shares.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I had this other side to me as well. And that was expressed through my relationship with my best mate called Wildman, who's dead now. So Wildman, while I'm doing all this studying, Wildman's in Fairfield High School, and he's got red dots in his head telling him to hurt people.
Okay.
And he grew so big, he started picking teachers up and putting them in the rubbish bins.
When he was still at school?
Yeah.
He was the same age as you, was he?
He was 2 years younger.
Right.
And the teachers got so scared of him, they had him outside raking leaves with the caretaker. So
to give him something physical to do.
Yes. And keep him at a safe distance.
Yeah.
So I don't know how familiar with Widnes you are, but there's Cronton, and before Cronton there's Peck's Hill.
Right.
And there's a quarry. Now, there's a tree overlooking the quarry that we call the thinking tree. That was me, Wildman, and his cousin Hammy. And we'd sit on the thinking tree, and Hammy would say to us, Shaun, what are you going to do, when you get older? And I'm like, I'm going to go to America, make $1 million, and fly you guys over. And then Hammy would say to Wildman, what are you going to do when you get older? And he'd be like, I've got red dots in my head telling me to hurt people. I'm going straight to prison. And I'm like, no, Peter, you're not going to go to prison. I'm going to fly you to America and get you a job as a wrestler. You're going to wrestle Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
This is how idealistic I was. But everything that we said on that tree, apart from the wrestling thing, came true.
Right. So that was, I remember doing a similar thing when I was a kid. They'd say to me, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to be a cameraman, I want to be a stuntman, and I want to be like Kwang Shai Kane from Kung Fu. And that was before I started Street Fight Secrets and all that and the self-defense thing. And in the end, I was all those things. So you had these ambitions. None of them sound particularly criminal.
No, they were mercenary. I'd watched that movie, Wall Street, Greed is Good.
Yeah, Gordon Gekko and that.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I wanted to go back to Arizona and settle there was because when I was running around with my aunt, when I was 16 in Arizona, she changed my date of birth in my passport, so I was 21, took me out nightclubbing and was introducing me to all these beautiful American women as Paul McCartney's nephew.
Happy days.
So I'm, nobody from Witness. All of a sudden, these American women hear their English accent. You're Paul McCartney's nephew, come and dance, I think I want some of this when I finish university.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your connection with America? Did you say you're half American?
Well, only because I lived there for 16 years. So it was a big part of it. I still say things like going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And
so your aunt was living in America.
Yeah. What happened was the World War II, we had the handsome American soldiers knocking up the local women.
Yes.
That happened to some of my family members who then settled in America, in Chicago.
Okay.
And then some of them moved over to Arizona, which is more of a retirement.
So a lot of Americans don't know this. When you were stationed here, you would, not all Americans, but some Americans were stationed in civilian housing, weren't they? Around the Northwest. Yeah. And if they weren't housed with civilians, they were certainly nearby. We had the same thing in Port Sunlight, Bebington, around Birkenhead, as you had in Widnes. Airmen, soldiers, just a threat, just a nuisance.
Some had wives back home, but some didn't have wives back home and brought the British women back with them. So that was the genesis of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So your first time in America was Tempe?
So I arrive in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm staying with my aunt on Union Hills in North Phoenix was the first property I stayed at. And I immediately sent out my resume to all the different stock brokerages.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And what was your resume with?
my degree and my A-levels and all that stuff. Yeah.
Because back then there was far fewer graduates, wasn't there? It meant something in a way that it probably doesn't nowadays. It was easier, I think.
Well, what meant something was being English.
Really? That was what opened the doors.
I was having a hard time getting a job in the UK. I wanted to be an investment analyst, and I'd go to these job interviews and there'd be independent school kids flying in helicopters who were competing against me.
Jesus.
Yeah, and I called my aunt, she's like, just get your ass out here, you go a long way with your English accent. I'm like, well, what about work visa? Oh, I'll just stamp a H1B1 work visa into your passport. We'll go to the printing shop. Don't worry about that.
Gangster auntie fixes it all. Nice. So then you were living and working with her in America for a while.
So I was living at my aunt's house in the first couple of months. I did get a job right away. And then I moved to a little apartment nearer to the office, and all my family members just donated like a hodgepodge of furniture.
Okay.
Yeah.
When did you first run afoul of the American penal system?
Okay, that's after I've got the stockbrokering career. I'm at the end of my stockbrokering career is when I convert to ecstasy.
Now, at the end of your stockbrokering career, you were successful.
Yeah, we're making $500,000 in commissions a year.
Why did you go to drugs if you were already making money as a stockbroker?
So I've written a lot of books about Escobar, and at the peak, his brother said, "You're worth $30 billion. Why don't we just go our own island and retire and kick back, and we won't get killed, and we won't do life in prison?" And Escobar was like, "I put the president in power. I've got 10,000 people working for me. You want me to kick back on some boring ass island?" My point being, money has got nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
it's ego and addiction to the lifestyle, being a character in the scene. Because when Wildman did get out of prison and fly over, and opened the door into that world of gangsters and striptease girls and just characters out of movies, that becomes so addictive to me. I decided to try making money out the party scene. I did an experiment whereby we went out and got some pills from LA and come back, and they went in one weekend. And then I made a decision. do I want to keep having to work these long hours, 6 o'clock in the morning sales meeting?
Yeah.
Or should I just try and make money from the party scene? And that was my fatal decision that caused me to eventually lose everything.
So there was a kind of a latent narcissism in you, as there would be in anybody, that said it's more fun being English, more enjoyable, more stimulation being English Shaun, the pill guy, than being English Shaun, the stockbroker
Exactly.
guy. And presumably more sexual opportunity.
More sex, more adulation, especially when it gets to the point where you're throwing a rave for like 10,000 people.
You were doing that?
At the peak of it, yeah.
Wow.
You're in the VIP area, you've got your own armed security team, like 20, 30 guys. People are just hugging you all night long, thanking you for the pills, thanking you for giving them a good time. And then you've got the after parties, and you're the man.
Yeah.
You've got the striptease girls, and it never ends.
So in a way, your brain is sort of like rewiring at that point to a certain level of stimulation that you're going to have to keep going. It's like being a victim of your own success, isn't it?
Yes, a willing victim of my own success.
Very willing victim. Very happy to be a victim of it. Do you think that you have a tendency towards risk-taking that is set higher than the average human?
Definitely, because I analysed this with the psychotherapist.
Okay.
And I've got addictive personality, I've got risk-taking, adrenaline junkie, I score highly on all these things.
For the people who don't know you, the story that you have, I just want to get this in early on in the interview, is you end up spending how many years in the American penal system?
6.
6 years. And that, you, for various reasons that we'll get into, you're like balls deep with gangs and gangsters and not reading the books, often unwillingly. You don't want to be. You're forced into it. Aryan Brotherhood, New Mexican Mafia, Mexican Mafia. I mean, was there at any point there where you were thinking, how the fuck have I ended up in this?
Yeah, and there were some points very early on.
Okay.
So when I flew Wildman over, he's in an apartment complex, Rancho Murrieta, and he introduced me to some guys who are New Mexican Mafia or Chicano gang members. One of them is this stately, he's got stately silver hair, swept back, older Mexican-looking guy, Mexican-American. Now, I've got a guy dealing pills for me out of this apartment complex. We're so organised now. We've got like pills in one, after party in another, money guns in another. And we're partying in one. And a guy shows up called G-Dog. He's a Mexican-American guy, ruggedly handsome, got the prison tattoos. And I'm talking to him because he's supplying the weed and the coke, and I'm supplying the ecstasy. A cop walks in and says, "Nobody move."
Uniformed cop.
Yeah. He says, "I can smell weed from outside, nobody move." And goes to get his radio. The guy I'm talking to, G-Dog, just pulls his gun out, goes to the cop. "The only one who's not leaving is you, motherfucker. Everybody run." I've never seen anything this heavy before in my life.
So English guy, right? Stockbroker, ends up in America, deals a few pills, pulls a few birds, and is like, "Hey, this is a laugh." And then you're in a party where a guy who's now an associate of you, he's now connected to you, pulls a gun on a cop and holds him up so that everybody in the party can run away.
We all shit ourselves and run into the night. So I go to a neighbouring, I'm in the same complex, but it's a neighbouring apartment building. We're all in there and we're like, oh, what the F are we going to do?
Yeah.
We're debating whether to flush our stuff because we reckon the cop's going to be all over us.
Yeah.
Next thing, there's a banging on the French window, bang, 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 and it's G-Dog. He's like, "Let me in."
Yeah.
Now, he said, "Turn the TV off. They can't get a warrant this fast to smash your door in.
Yeah.
Turn the lights off. Nobody answer the door. You don't need to flush your shit. Everyone just shut the F up."
Yeah.
We're still crapping it. They did knock on the door and then they went next door and they continued on their way.
Yeah.
At the end of that evening, I took him to a property in Phoenix that I had.
Yeah.
And we just shot pool. And at the end of that, he said, "Look, Shaun, because you and your mates protected me and my brothers have got your back."
Okay.
I had no idea what that meant. So months later, he says, "Come and meet one of my brothers." We go over, there's all the showcase lowrider cars on the street. The guy answers, he's short, bald. He's looking up at me like with this hard face. But when he heard my accent, he kind of relaxed a bit. And he's like, "Damn, you talk funny. I guess you must be from England. Come in and meet my homies."
Right.
Go into the living room, all these massive tattooed Mexican-American gang members wife beater vest, shorts down below, and all these chains, tattoos. And there's like slabs of coke, slabs of meth, weighing apparatus, all kinds of guns. They've got the biggest TV I've ever seen in my life. They've got a little TV showing all the comings and goings on the street. When I look at the big TV, I do a double take. I'm like, oh, that's not an ornament. Hold on a minute. I know where I saw that before in a Rambo movie. Rocket propelled grenade launcher on top of the TV. And one of them swings a spoonful of white powder into my face and says, snort this. I'm like, G-Dog, yeah, snort this. Like test to see if you're a cop.
Okay.
So that's how I got into business with them. But there was another...
So you were forced to snort a large amount of cocaine just to prove that you weren't undercover?
Yeah.
Wow.
So around that time, I'm going to go back to the stately guy with the swept back silver hair.
Yeah.
I'm still a stockbroker at this time, right? During these two incidents that should have given me the red flag. I get a call from a guy who's selling for me, and he goes, can you grab Wildman and come over here right away? We've got a situation. And I said, well, what's the situation? He says, I don't want to say on the phone. So I go looking for Wildman, and he's collecting crack debts for these people in Central Phoenix. So I can't find him. So I go to the apartment in Tempe, and the guy answers the door of his girlfriend. His girlfriend's crying. I think, oh shit, someone's assaulted her, and they want Wildman to do him in. I'm like, what's the matter? What's the matter? And I hear this noise. Zzz, zzz, zzz. And I'm looking around this room, and they both got this horrified look on their face. I'm like, what's going on? And they said, you better go see. I'll never forget this. So I walk into this room. There's a naked, hog-tied man with a rockabilly quiff.
Yeah.
Completely naked, tied up, gagged.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of Mexicans with cattle prods stood over him. And the guy with the silver hair is at the back giving orders in Spanish. When he gave an order, they prodded him with the electroshock things. He starts rocking like a rocking horse, terror in his eyes. And as they electrocute him, piss shoots out of his dick.
Fucking hell.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, right, I've got to put on a brave face here, even though I'm shitting myself, because if they think I'm the weak link, what's going to happen to me? So I'm just like, yeah, it looks like you guys have got this under control, blah, blah, blah. I'll tell Wildman, because Wildman was my back. I'll tell Wildman, he's not needed. And the guy with the silver just gave me this smile, like welcome to the family kind of smile. So then I turned to the guy and his girlfriend. I'm saying, what happened? And they said, right, that guy on the floor is one of my customers. As you know, I'm selling your product, and I'm also selling their product. That guy came and bought some stuff off me, waited, thought I'd left the house, broke in, we caught him in here. He was stealing your stuff, he was stealing their stuff. I called you, I called them, and they got here first.
Oh.
And then he said, what I found out later had happened was they called his roommates and said, we need 10,000 or he's going to the desert.
Right.
And they paid 10,000. But all the way back to my office, I was tripping.
That's heavy.
I could see that guy's face all the way back to the office.
It's extremely traumatic.
Yeah.
And even though they're your mates, it's still...
And I didn't quit. And then the other thing that happened was...
I'd have been on a plane that afternoon. See you later, lads.
I was in the car park at my stop outside the stockbrokers, counting drug ecstasy cash on my lap.
Yeah.
And the boss's secretary got in the car next to me and looked over.
Yeah.
And then the next day I got called into the boss's office and he says, Shaun, you're in a crossroads in your life right now where you can go up that way, continue your slow and steady progress in the stock market and have bigger successes. Or you can go this way and his eyes widen, which leads to hell and consequences. And I chose...
You chose hell?
Yeah. And that's because...
And you really did end up in hell.
I did. And that's because when you're taking drugs for a long time, especially meth and all these other club drugs, it scrambles your decision-making processes.
Yeah.
It erodes your conscience. You don't see the consequences of your actions, and you think that we were joking. We're living we're like characters now in a movie like Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Breaking Bad wouldn't have been a series that was out then, but there's also like Breaking Bad elements to that. Have you seen Breaking Bad?
Breaking Bad is in New Mexico, and we're in Arizona, the next state over. So everyone that Walter White met, we dealt with in Arizona.
Oh, that's like a fictionalized version of reality, is it?
But he took it to the murder level, didn't he?
Right.
There were deaths, but I wasn't involved in murders.
Right.
One of the things that did bring down the organization was Wildman versus my top ecstasy salesperson. Wildman was trying to murder him, and ended up going to the police.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's what brought things...
They had 10 witnesses, but he was the inside guy.
Okay, so we're going quickly through the baseline story here, because there's stuff that's specific to the psychology of what you've endured that I want to get into. If people want a more paced version of this, there's your interview on True Geordie.
Yeah, there's 5 of them.
5?
Yeah.
And they're 2 hours each, aren't they?
At least.
So Dylan was saying we're going to get through the story. Dylan, the producer, saying we're going to get through the story today. We're not. In 2 hours, there's a lot that needs unpacking.
The trilogy's 30 plus hours, the audiobook trilogy. Hard Time, Prison Time, Party Time.
Is there anybody talking about making a film of this, or?
We've got a documentary coming out this summer with Sammy the Bull Gravano.
Okay.
It's 90 minutes long. I can't disclose which channel it's going to be on in America, but they've got almost 100 million subscribers. It's a major TV platform.
With Sammy the Bull, wasn't that, like, people who don't know your story are going to find this really confusing? Wasn't he an enemy of yours at that time?
All right, it's complicated.
There's so much there's a lot to learn in this story.
So there was an ecstasy ring.
Yeah.
Basically, the way my ecstasy ring came around was when I was still a stockbroker, I'd pull up in a twin turbo Mazda RX-7 in some grungy downtown location. So the rave kids started calling me the Bank of England.
Right.
They saw the flash car. They knew I was a stockbroker, and they would come to me to invest in their party ideas.
Okay.
Those little cliques were competing against each other, and sometimes they would have disputes, and they would come to me in Wildman, and we'd adjudicate. But by doing so, we incorporated them into the criminal enterprise.
Right.
So at the peak of it, we had about 200 local people working for us.
In Tempe?
Across Arizona.
Across Arizona, okay.
Yeah. Now, the base was Acid Joey's house in Tempe, 327 South Beck. God, we had craziness happen there. But anyway, over the years, a new kind of ecstasy dealer started to appear. Steroid head jock, leopard print shirts, not the kind of stuff ravers would wear.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, who the hell are these guys?
Yeah.
Now, my wife, when I met her, she was doing lesbian internet porn, and she had a bisexual lover. We got married on the Las Vegas Strip. She had a female bisexual lover who was dating...
I'm just going to accept what you're saying, Shaun, and allow that to carry on. I'm not going to stop you. Please keep going.
She had a female bisexual lover who started dating one of these new kind of ecstasy dealers.
Right.
And through the women, we brokered a sit-down in Tucson at a bar called Heart 5.
Okay.
So I get my guy, one of the Rossetti brothers, with me. He's strapped. I said, I don't know who these guys are. If they kidnap me, just open up on the motherfuckers. I go in there first with my wife. He sneaks in behind us. I'm high on meth and GHB and all sorts to get the bravery up for this meeting, because I had social anxiety. This is the thing as well.
I'm actually an introvert, ladies and gents.
All this drug-fueled insanity is rooted in me having social anxiety as a teenager and almost getting beat to death by some drunks.
When did that happen?
When I just passed my driver's license test and I went to fill my mum's little red car with petrol, these guys started to behave abusively towards me. I must have watched too much Rambo. I thought it was brave to stand up to them.
How old were you then?
How old are you when you pass your test, when you're a teenager?
16, 17. This is Witness.
Witness. So they surrounded me, top of Witness. They surrounded me, and they're kicking me in the head, kicking me in the face.
They're kicking a 16-year-old to bits.
Yeah, they're like 20 in the 20s rugby player size guys. One pulls out an iron bar, bam. See these teeth?
Yeah.
How nice and white they are?
Yeah.
Knock the bottoms of my teeth off with an iron bar.
This is the thing around Widnes and around that area, isn't it? You have some big lumps of lads there as well, don't you? It's like, is it a rugby town the same as like St Helens and all that?
This was more towards the Rain Hill way.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So were they, I don't suppose you remember if they were Scousers or you wouldn't?
Oh, I don't know.
No.
Don't know.
But they smashed your teeth out.
Left me for dead. I was unconscious. So I was in this position, and my body's getting warm and numb, and I thought they'd stop hitting me. So I opened my eyes, and they're still hitting me, but I can't even feel it.
Right.
And I'm like, how can I not feel this? And I got terrified. Then I thought I was going to die. I thought they're trying to kill me. This isn't just a beating. And then I passed out, and I woke up in this pool of blood. They smashed the car windows. I went to get checked out medically, but all that was messed up was my teeth. But that compounded my anxiety. I wouldn't go out and talk to strangers. I wouldn't go in pubs and talk to anyone I didn't know. I wouldn't dance I was too scared to dance, too self-conscious. I wouldn't go and talk to women. And then when raving started and I took ecstasy, complete opposite. I wouldn't stop dancing, talking to strangers, hugging people all night long.
Talking to women, he wouldn't stop. Couldn't stop him.
Well, that went on then until the SWAT team came. My trajectory of taking drugs to address social anxiety.
So when did you first take ecstasy? What age in your timeline of your life?
This is like 89, 90, rave scene, UK, Summer of Love, Manchester, Thunderdome.
You're 21 then, aren't you?
I'm still at uni.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have this new character that's born of drugs.
Yeah.
That comes out in you that's super confident. You've kind of just said, ecstasy is a party drug. And then you said meth is a party drug. Where is meth a party drug?
It was big in the party scene, meth.
In the UK?
In Arizona.
Oh, okay.
It never crossed over to the UK.
Yeah.
But because with meth, before meth, there was the cokeheads. And, you'd have to buy a ball and you do it and you buy another ball. With meth, you just do a line and it would last you all night.
Yeah.
So you save a lot of money and the high would just keep going.
And you snort it?
And you feel superhuman. Yeah, I primarily snorted it, ate it, and occasionally did a hot rail, but I've never smoked anything.
What's a hot rail?
So a hot rail, you get a glass tusa, you heat half of it up on the stove top, and then you pick it up and you snort a line, and as the powder goes in, because the part of the tuta is so hot, it turns into smoke and the smoke comes out your mouth.
So you in through your nose and then out through your mouth?
In through your nose is powder and out is smoke.
But as burnt powder, which must hurt like fuck.
Any way you take meth hurts like fuck. I ended up with stomach ulcers from eating it. I ended up with, when you first snort it, you just put your head back and it's so painful. You are like sobbing with tears. Tears are just running. They call them crystal tears. It's just running down your face. But the people who are into it, they get off on that. They're like buzzing that it's hitting them so hard it's going to be a good high.
I've had that from coke in the past, where people whinge. They don't like the way it numbs their throat. They don't like when the flakes make you cough. And I was like, I love all of that now.
Because then you're not getting ripped off.
Yeah. Every single part of the horror. I learned to love it all.
Yeah.
So meth, I've taken paste, like the stuff that they make from speed, and it probably isn't as strong as meth, but you would take that once and then you would be flying all night.
Yes.
That's why you would do it, so that you keep dancing.
So I had courage then when I sat down with these guys who I didn't know who they were. So I'm thinking, they know who I am. I'm English Shaun. I've got to do something crazy. As we're sitting down on this sofa, there was two of them. There was a shorter one called the Spaniard and a 6.5 foot steroid head guy. And he takes me through to the VIP room. He's like, everyone get out, get off the sofa, clears the room. And as I'm sitting down with these guys, I remember what my grandfather Fred used to do to me. He grabbed me above the knee, make me jump. So I did that to them.
Did they like that?
The Spaniard was laughing. The other one, they were playing nice and nasty.
Yeah.
So the Spaniard's like, English Shaun, we know you're doing a lot of business.
Yeah.
Why don't you work with us?
Yeah.
And I'm just summarising now because it was a long conversation. And I said to them, we were sending people to Holland with testing kits from a website called Dance Safe and testing the quality of the pill. It goes purple, blue in the testing kit.
Okay.
A good pill should be 100, 125 milligrams of MDMA and clay. So I said to them, you guys have got these coloured pills. I've got a good reputation for my presses from Holland. I'd rather stay with my own product. And the big guy jumps up and says, who the F are you disrespecting our pills? One call to Sammy the Bull and we can have you taken out to the desert. I didn't know whether he was blowharding or what.
Yeah.
So the calmer guy says, look, he's a bit of a hothead, calm down, blah, blah, blah. And in conclusion, I said to them, there's enough demand for ecstasy for us to coexist. It's not each other we need to worry about, it's the cops. Since you guys have been running around saying you're the biggest drug barons in the world, the feds are everywhere. They're going around taping our license plates with cameras. There's undercover cops everywhere. And that was the conclusion. But what happened next was there was an uneasy truce, and then a faction of the Gravano enterprise lured my top salesperson, Skinner, to a nightclub in Scottsdale under the pretenses of buying stuff from him, a big amount of stuff. Took his stuff, took his gun, took his money, and knocked his teeth out.
Right.
So that's when I moved to $1 million house on the side of a mountain in Tucson in a gated guarded community where you couldn't even get up the hill without talking to the guardian. You had to contact the house to let you up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from that point on, everything was frosty between you. And these are Gravano's people or Gravano's sons?
All right,
people?
so the ecstasy, let me give you the history of it because there's been a lot of controversy around it. The ecstasy ring, the Gravano enterprise, which Sammy the Bull ended up convicted of and put in prison for, was originally started by a guy called Mike Papa, steroid head jock guy. He brought in Gerard Gravano and Karen Gravano.
Okay.
So the kids were running it at the street level.
Okay.
When the dad found out, the dad started to give Gerard some advice and invested money into it. But he did not know what was going on at the street level. But people were throwing his name around. So we thought the dad was calling the shots, but it wasn't. It was the son.
Okay.
We'd infiltrated the house with a striptease dancer, and she was in there, she said, with a bunch of Guidos, having barbecues and, telling us the layout and everything. So if anything ever popped off with them, we could retaliate.
Okay.
Yeah.
The reason why I asked you is because at the time, I imagine Sammy the Bull wouldn't be young. And I was like, why would a guy at that age even bother with it? So it was actually his kids were throwing his name in. And then he just said, yeah, fine, I'll take a piece of it.
Yeah, and the prosecutor, when they found they recorded him, the son said, I need some money for gas, which is petrol. And the dad said, yeah, I'll give you this much money for gas, which was a drug transaction, putting money in. The prosecutors recorded that, so that was a piece of evidence that he was in the conspiracy. And then if they could say he's running it, it's news headlines, isn't it, for the state?
But you know him now, so have you asked him how involved he really was?
Yeah, so I've done this documentary with him that's coming out on this big platform, like I said. And I also did a documentary. We were both in a documentary. I think it was National Geographic, Narco Wars, How He Busted the Bull. And one of the cops off the case, they interviewed him at the end and he said, Sammy the Bull will look you straight in the face and said he never had anything to do with ecstasy, even though he served 15 years, whatever, for it.
Right.
It's got this old school Italian mafia thing, isn't it? Don't get involved in drugs, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So
are you saying, well, now I'm putting you in a position because I still work with him. He was involved, but is saying he isn't? Or he just really was hands off?
He was hands off.
Yeah.
Under the law, he was involved because he invested in it and gave his son advice on it.
Yeah.
That was the extent of it.
But he's not saying get 50,000 pills from here and move it to these people. He's not that.
No.
Okay.
He's not.
Okay.
And this is, my trolls kind of tricked Sammy the Bull into saying that they said to him, do you know this Shaun Attwood, this media guy in England, he's saying that he's had meetings with you or something, or they said I've met him personally. He's like, no, I've no fucking idea who this guy is, what you're talking about. I've never ever claimed to have met him. Okay. But my trolls tricked him into saying this. So they're going to eat their words when they see this documentary come out this summer.
And do you sit with him and interview him, or have you done Skype
we were
interviews?
filmed separately because he can't come here and I can't go there. But we are.
Oh shit!
We are communicating.
Can you never go to America again?
No, I don't know how much I can reveal of this, but we are. There's a potential big first meeting collaboration in the pipeline. That's all I can say.
Let's leave it at that. Because
NDAs.
You're better off just saying less. Always say less. So people who are associated to him are throwing his name around. It doesn't matter because if they're killers are killers. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
He's a formidable character.
I mean, yeah. And these are people related to him. So these are Italian Americans who are running ecstasy in Arizona.
No.
He
was in witness protection after testifying against John Gotti.
Okay.
These are steroid head jocks. He was clicked up with a gang called the Devil Dogs. Okay. Which were, I think they were a bit supremacist, and they would, when they attack people, they would bark and yelp like dogs.
And these are white supremacists.
That was part of his clique out there, yeah. So he's away from the mafia now, and he's clicked up with the jocks and the supremacists. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry for laughing, but as a Brit, when you hear about the American gang scene and the American prison scene and the race politics in prison, it's kind of weird. I only learned yesterday through listening to your True Geordie podcast that the American Mexicans and Mexico Mexicans, they beef.
They're at war, yeah. Chicanos and the Nationals, yeah.
I had no idea. No idea. And that's a territorial fight for control. Yeah. Okay. But the American Mexicans, they're buying product from Mexico.
Yeah.
They are.
Well, it's convenient for them, yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're all in bed when it's convenient for them. But when it's not, they're at war.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I suppose it's the same as at every level of humanity, isn't it? It's the same with countries.
People are contradictory and hypocritical.
Yeah. So they'll be like, oh, we absolutely hate these guys unless there's money involved.
Yeah.
So the ultimate race is money. The ultimate religion is money. The ultimate everything is money.
So when Sammy the Bull got arrested for the ecstasy, there was guys in Tempe sent from John Gotti to assassinate him. And the cops that were surveying Gravano saved his life by arresting him. And then they arrested all these other guys. I think they had a bomb. Did they even hit Wildman? Wildman was on the run in Mexico. And the representatives from Gotti had come to Wildman. The enemy of the enemy is your friend. What do you know about Gravano? Would you make a move against Gravano for us?
This is okay. So this is what many of these things put me into a little bit of shock, and I'm struggling to catch up. I know Tempe because I've done interviews on narcissistic abuse there. I've done seminars there. Yeah. For me, Tempe is a high-tech student town that's made of squares in the desert, and I quite like it because it's organised and nice. And they're doing mafia hits.
Yep.
In this place. Yeah. And there's rival gangs like something out of a Cormac McCarthy novel, something out of Breaking Bad, and this is all going off in Tempe.
Absolutely. I mean, any city you go to on the surface, you don't know what's going on in the underworld. Every city's got its underworld. I never would have guessed.
America's
hardcore, Richard.
Yeah.
Guns, drugs, they're on the Arizona-Mexico border. Cartel activities off the scale.
Okay. So, all right, this is one of the things I wanted to ask you about. Do you think that British people think, because we're consuming American TV and American culture, that we know America, but actually we really, really don't? Do you get that impression that maybe people underestimate what America is and how wild it still is?
I think the media portrays it as pretty wild.
Okay.
Breaking Bad, all these crazy TV series and movies.
I worry, though, it generates a false cynicism that, like, people go, oh, yeah, I know what that is, but it's not real because it's on TV. Do you know what I mean? And then when you go there, you're like, oh, shit.
When I got there and I'm writing home, when I've looked at the letters just for me writing home, this was 91 when I arrived, about what was on the news. So on the news, there was a serial killer of cats who was shooting cats in people's windows. They were warning people, don't... if you see a car at night with its lights off, don't flash them to turn it on because it's a gangbanger ritual whereby they will shoot you dead.
The first person to flash them to turn the lights on,
they will shoot you dead
as an initiation for a new gang member.
And they were talking about how many people getting killed every weekend, how many people getting shot dead every weekend. But it hadn't quite caught up with California where it was every day. But they were worried that was what was going to happen, and it probably is by now. The murder rate is multiple of the UK. It's probably 4 or 5 times.
So when there is crime and there is trouble, it's very, very, very serious.
And it's constant.
So my predominant my sister lives in America. My nephews are American. I've had contact for the last 20 years in America. That's my predominant market. And with the self-defense community, it was always like a bit of a joke where people would say, like, if you wanted good self-defense, you would use Brits, Australians, or Canadians because they brawl in bars. And then they'd be like, well, why aren't the Americans good at this? And it's like, they're not going to fight you. They're going to kill you. Don't assume because they're not as good at brawling or they won't do this and that. They just fucking kill you. And so in America, Canadians, Australians, and Brits, I think also because of the accent, we had an advantage in terms of selling the self-defense products.
Yeah.
But I think generally there's kind of a lack of appreciation, a lack of understanding for how quickly things get very, very, very violent there.
Can I give you a story of an extreme crime, one of the most extreme I ever heard about? So Wildman, when he first came, his first property, it ended up with a guy coming over and there was a couple and they were looking for crack and the Mexicans were over the street. And the woman went to get the crack and the man stayed with Wildman and the man had a gun on him. Wildman said, I've never seen guns before. Can you show me how they work? And the guy goes, yeah, the safety's on it. And he pulled the trigger and shot himself in the head dead in front of Wildman and collapsed on the doorstep. I had no idea this had happened until my aunt called me and said, this is Peter's place is on the headline news. You need to get your ass up there. You might be dead.
Yeah.
Well, I went up there. There was camera crews, there was police. I shit myself and I went back to work. But I went later on in the day, blood on the step, corpse is gone. Wildman's in the living room with a homicide detective. He asked me some questions. I'd rented the place for Peter, etc. I said to the cop, you must have seen some stuff. What's the worst thing? One of the worst things you've ever encountered? And he said, well, have you seen the serial killer the bits about the serial killer on the news who's killing the joggers. And I said, yeah. And he said, he's throwing their heads into Salt River. And I said, yeah. He goes, we've kind of got him, we've got his DNA. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said that the serial killer was cutting the heads off the women and skull fucking them so hard and ejaculating in the skulls so deeply that when they threw the heads into the river, Salt River, the water wasn't washing the semen out, and that's how they got his DNA.
Because it was, oh my God.
This is what America is like.
I shouldn't laugh. Fucking hell, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow. And that's daily life for that fella, for his job and what he's doing. And
we interviewed one of the co-founders of the 18th Street Gang, and when he came out towards the end of last year and he come to Surrey, because he's from central LA, he said it was the first time in his life he could breathe easy.
Right.
He could not believe how safe he felt in this country. It was the first time in his life versus how dangerous it is in America.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is reflected inside of their prison system as well. Like the level of violence that you faced. But you've not been in a British prison, have you?
Only doing talks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is your assessment, generally speaking, that it's safer here? It would be easier to live kind of a life in prison here than in America?
One guard said to me that after I did a talk in the prison, it was the first time the prisoners went back to their cells not complaining about anything.
They was silent. I've only read some of this stuff. It is very, very, very disturbing material. Have you been to therapy for everything that you've been through here?
So I had the therapy in prison time. 10% of prison time is my therapy with that doctor who was great. And I got him kind of an exclusive with him because the prisoners wouldn't speak to him because they believed if you said anything to the therapist, it would put in a file and used against you. But I liked him because he did Eastern philosophy and meditation and all this stuff. And he helped me with quotes. He said, bring in quotes you can use in your life and we'll go over them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I really loved the guy and I credit him with putting a framework in my brain, like safety valves when certain, things happen around me. These circuit breakers kick in.
Right.
And I fall back on what he taught me.
Okay.
Yeah, so he said you need to continue therapy, get to witness, request therapy. They said there's a 2-year waiting list.
Right.
They had me on risperidone and they tried to make me double my dose. I said, look, I was on meds off and on in the prison because it's a crazy environment. Now I'm out, I'm feeling okay, I don't need them. They said, that's grandiosity, we need to double your dose. And they started to threaten home visits and blood tests. They were about to section me, but fortunately, I moved down south and my medical file didn't transfer. Wildman gets out of prison, goes to the same witness mental health team, tells him he's got red dots in his head telling him to hurt people. They said he was embellishing that to try and get better benefits and there was nothing wrong with him at all. Well
assessed. Well done. Bravo. Bravo.
He comes up to me, told you there was nothing wrong with me. I'm fucking normal. I've been telling you my whole life I'm normal.
With like a human scalp in each hand, mopping his sweating brow. Told you I was normal. Told you there's nothing wrong with me. So the mental health assistance that you got here when you came back was just piss poor.
I had to continue my program of self-study, introspection, fitness, meditation, martial arts, all these classes, yoga, all that is what rehabilitated, calm my anxiety down. Because, like I said, the root cause was my social anxiety, one of them. And then I was forced to confront that head on, wasn't I? Because for 6 years almost, I'm living with people, maniacs, murderers, gangbangers. Some of my friends, but some I wouldn't have wanted to be around. So for 6 years, I was sober in close proximity to hardcore people.
And if you didn't have social anxiety in the beginning, you fucking well would at the end.
No, that cured it because
exposure therapy.
When I got out, the world seemed safe.
Yeah. Everything was piece of piss.
I've just been like, my adrenaline's been going for the past 6 years.
Yeah.
And this is like a walk in the park now. England is so safe after this.
Tell people, okay, so people who don't know you're watching this, like you're up on drugs charges, drug trafficking is pretty serious. But why would you end up in a bad prison if you're just on drugs charges? Can you just walk them through what happened there?
Yeah, so if you commit a crime in an area, you go to the jail in that area. Because most of my stories, the most extreme stuff that happened to me was in the jail. I was fighting my case for 26 months. It was run by a guy called Sheriff Joe Pio. He's got everyone in pink underwear and black and white beach stripes, chain gangs.
Right.
He reinstated the chain gangs from like the 1920s and stuff. And that jail, National Geographic did my Bang the Broad episode. They researched it. 62 people died over a 5-year period in that jail around the time I was there, making the jail with the highest rate of death in America.
Jail, not prison.
Remand.
62 deaths in a remand.
Over 5 years.
And they just said, oh, okay, just leave it open, let's keep going.
He prided himself on being America's toughest sheriff. A lot of those deaths were his guards murdering mentally ill people and murdering a blind person. And if people think I'm making that up, Google Scott Norberg, Google Brian Crenshaw.
Tell me about the guards murdering a blind man. How did that come to pass?
I think that one was Brian Crenshaw, and he failed to produce his ID for the evening meal for the chow of the Red Death.
So, okay, so he's failed to provide his ID. Okay.
Then they pulverised him.
For not providing an ID?
Yeah.
How many guards attacked him?
I don't know, but there are videos of some of these people. I had some of them on my YouTube channel. We had to take them down. And it's like, if people put in Sheriff Joe Pio's jail, guards murdering inmates, some of my videos will still come up. One of them, I think he's a Vietnam vet, and he's just stood there and they're yelling at him. And he's mentally ill. And it's like they're a pack of wolves on him and they just can't stop. In one of the cases, the guys turn blue and a female guard says stop and they push her off. And then the prisoner started yelling, he's already dead. Why are you still beating him? And they continue to beat the corpse.
And when you say beating him, presumably they're still using like official tactics. They're not just kicking him in the head.
They've just got him pinned down. They're just smashing him and tasering him.
And is there no standard operational procedures for restraint or control?
The way I view it is, when something becomes that intense, it's like, they start with a protocol and they turn into animals.
I've seen that on doors, especially with one of the things I've not to digress too much. One of the things I've seen on the doors, and I've trained American cops as well, and American prison officers, British prison officers, people all over the world. Is I always say to them, look, if you're under a situation of high stress, it's not like your prisoners or criminals are going to be polite and nice to you. You're going to have to eat a lot of disrespect. It builds up inside of you. Then at the moment where you get the opportunity to be violent, you're now offloading the violence of 30 instances of disrespect onto one person. And I first saw that on the door. And if you get a pack of lads, they can lose their minds and they can do, I also have, like, you can lose your mind. You get like this pack instinct where if we're stood on the door and somebody attacks you, I just pop, like something just switches. It's like, I think it's a primal tribal instinct. You have to fight all that. And I'm not making excuses because it's absolutely a moral absolute wrong, but I can see the psychology of how this can happen without proper training and without proper interventions.
Happens a lot.
Like they have to decompress. They have to, and you got to weed out the psychopaths because there'll be lads in there who are there to batter people. You can't have that. You can't have that mindset there because the human body is more frail than people imagine. People just die. So in this situation where the lad turned blue, had they handcuffed him?
I can't remember because this is so long ago when I watched these videos and there's so many cases of it.
But he was on the floor.
Yes.
So there can be like an asphyxiation
I
effect.
think they are restrained on most of them. Yeah.
It's so dangerous. A lot of them don't even know. You cuff somebody with their hands, but it's like the George Floyd thing. Cuff the hands behind the back and then put pressure on the back. And you do that for more than a couple of minutes. Some people just go.
I think Brian Crenshaw went into a coma and died over a month later. That's what happened in his.
And this was, and I notice you use the term when you talk about this, and I know that you're passionate about this, you use the term mentally ill a lot for prisoners.
Yeah.
I worked for the probation service, as I told you in our interview. Was your assessment that a lot of people in prison are essentially mentally ill?
When One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest came out, they thought it was a humanitarian thing to close down the mental facilities. I think it was Kennedy. So then they all went onto the streets, and de facto prison system became the biggest house of the mentally ill in America, which it still is to this day.
It's so interesting you use that film as your reference, because that's what I was saying to people. I would say to people, you think that the probation service and the potential prisoners I'm looking at, you think it's like an episode of like American Me or The Sopranos. It's not. It's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
You look at a room full of people and they're twitching and rocking and chatting to themselves. There are hardened criminals amongst them, but not the thick end of the wedge is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. People who are very, very mentally ill.
Almost half of them were lining up to see the meds nurse when she did her pill calls.
And you're housing them together in what seems to be an intrinsically violent atmosphere.
Yeah.
What I always wonder is, from the stories I've heard of the American penal system, it sounds like the guards have an unwritten rule where they allow a certain amount of violence amongst the prisoners. They permit a certain degree of beatings amongst the prisoners.
They make bets on who's going to win in fights and have people fight. We had Joey Torres on, we had Michael Thompson on, Nick Yaris, and where they were housed, the guards they were making them fight to the death. And one of them was a clerk, and they ordered the ambulance, and the death reports written up before these guys had died. They brought all the female staffers out. They had them all lined up in rows, all the guards and the female staffers watching the prisoners fight to death. People think I'm making this up. Google Corcoran Prison. It's documented.
Where is this prison?
Corcoran Prison, California. And what happened was, there were so many, the incidence of deaths in that prison went so much off the scale, hundreds times, whatever percent more, that the FBI was called in to investigate it.
I remember hearing about this and thinking it was bollocks. I was like, that sounds like a plot from a movie. And when I actually looked it up, I think they were even saying that if the prisoners refused to fight, they were being shot in the legs with small caliber pistols and stabbed by the guards, forcing them to fight.
Yeah.
How do things get so wildly out of control?
Because the guards had formed their own gang.
Right.
And one of the witnesses against the guards was a prison staff member. The guards gang did a drive-by on his house. So when he went to testify, he had a bulletproof vest on. The judge said, "Why are you wearing a bulletproof vest? You're a prison worker." And he said, "They've done a drive-by on my house."
So they're as bent as any of the prisoners who are in there.
Yeah, it's out of control in America.
Okay, so let's go back. You're eventually done for drug trafficking because of an attempted murder within your own organization.
Let me just rephrase that a bit.
Go ahead.
The attempted murder of Skinner by Wildman. So when Skinner was my top ecstasy sales guy, right? And I called him little brother, big brother. And we were this tight, right? And then when Wildman flew over, because Wildman, he came and went because he kept getting deported. His first visit only lasted a few months. He was classified as a menace to society and banned from America for life. So I was flying like Mission Impossible style teams of people, crews of people around the world to smuggle him back in through Mexico and Canada.
Right.
He came over. I'm hanging out with him more than I am Skinner.
Right.
Again, it's all psychological, isn't it? Skinner's now getting peeved because he's little brother and he's getting ignored.
Yeah.
So they fall out. Skinner comes up with a plot. Wildman's back in a federal deportation prison. Wild Woman, she's selling for me, right? That's
Wildman's wife.
Mad Scouser. Some of the people more scared of her.
Why are you laughing?
And the feds actually, when they classified the criminal organisation, they had her as number 2. Wildman was number 3. He was pissed off.
Oh, I bet he was.
Yeah. She was actually filmed running out of a house with a giant fan in Tempe, chasing Wildman and Wildman running away from her. Yeah. So Skinner's plot was, he knew she was selling for me. Problem reaction solution.
Yeah.
He had he had a firebomb launched through her window, which almost hit her. She got a scar on her face, almost set fire to her.
Oof.
Then he had some Southside gangsters come and say, "Look, we're with English Shaun, get in the car, we're going to take you to safety," and they were going to take her pills.
Right.
But they didn't know she was a mad scouser.
Right.
So she's like, "Who the fuck do you think I am? Do I look like I just got off the fucking banana boat? Do I look like fucking chopped liver? Do you think I'm going to get in the fucking car with yous?" And that's what they didn't.
I cannot believe a Scouse lady would speak in such a fashion.
They took off.
Yeah.
I didn't know who was behind it at that point, but we found out it was Skinner.
Right.
And when Wildman found out, he was like, get me out of this prison now.
Yeah.
So I got his deportation expedited, flew him back, and he was just smoking crack and meth, unlimited amounts every day on a one track then to murder Skinner. Skinner got so scared he went to the cops and left the state. Wildman found out where Skinner was living, but he wasn't there. A good friend of mine, another one who's dead now, called Joey Crack, was in there. And Joey Crack was telling us all these stories in the jail later on when the Italian mafia moved him in so he could be my cellmate. And he's telling me, so he shows up at Skinner's.
Wait a second, the Italian mafia can choose who goes where in a prison?
Oh man, the Italian mafia for a brief period of time took over my building in the jail.
And they said, put him with him.
The head of the Italian mafia, he was out, we'd be all locked down at night, and he'd be out smoking with the guards and giving them orders. And he said to me, who do you want to move in with you? And I said, Wildman. They couldn't have Wildman move in with me because the prosecutor put a do not house. So he had the guards bring Wildman in to my building every day and sit with me all day long until it was locked down, and then he went back to his building.
I'm sorry for this digression. Why were they doing favors for you?
All right. So
this is why I said there's a lot to unpack. In
Hard Time, there's a chapter called Little Italy. So the whites have been completely run by the neo-Nazi Aryan Brotherhood until that point, right? There was a crazy race riot that they had orchestrated, the Nazis. They were trying to pressure me to get my girlfriend to bring drugs in. It was mayhem. Then all of a sudden, there's two tiers. At the top of the tier, these Italian guys started getting put in a cell together, and they started increasing in numbers.
Right.
And then the head of the whites got moved on. I think he was sentenced to something. When the head of the whites gets moved on or gets beat up or whatever, whenever there's no head, there's a white boy meeting where you have to vote on who's going to be the new head of the race.
And as a white man, you have to go whether you like Aryan Brotherhood or not.
Or you're going to get your teeth smashed out. You're going to get your head knocked into a toilet. So this Italian guy won the head of the race voting.
The Italian guy became head of the Aryan Brotherhood?
No, became head of the whites.
And the whites voted for an Italian guy to be the head of the whites?
Yeah, because he was white.
Wait a second. Wait, okay, so you've done this race politics, and I know not every state in America does this. Some of them apparently, on the East Coast, they don't. I've read and seen YouTube videos, they don't really do this. But in Arizona and California, they do. So do white and Italians in prison generally have a problem, or is it generally...
No, the whites, Italians are in the whites.
So
they're not Nazis, but they're whites.
I did not know that.
If you've got white skin, that doesn't make you an AB.
Okay.
That just makes you white. There's only a limited amount of AB members.
That's if you're AB, you're officially patched up or whatever.
Yeah, there's only a
in.
very small amount of them, but they control the entire white race.
So if I'm Italian and I go into prison, it's the area, and I have a problem. It's the Aryan Brotherhood I go to for help.
The Aryan Brotherhood tell you how it's going to be.
Right, you don't go to them for help.
No, they tell you.
They come
the
to
rules.
you. Right, okay.
And they tell you to put work in.
And will they go to Italians and say, right, you're now one of us, or you work for us now?
Right. When you go in, all the races are scanning you as soon as you walk in.
Okay.
To figure out which clique you're going to go in.
Right.
Sometimes it's ambiguous and it causes situations.
That's why I'm sat here going, I didn't want to say it, but it must be ambiguous.
So a white guy showed up.
Yeah.
And tried to click up with the blacks.
Right. And this happened.
And he got the living daylights beat out of him.
By the blacks or by the whites?
By the whites.
Okay.
Because he was claiming this and that.
What, he said that genetically he was...
I don't know what he said, whether he said he was an albino or he said he was part of something or other.
Right.
But he wanted to be with the blacks, and they kind of like let him in for a bit. And then he ended up getting attacked and smashed.
Okay.
So it right away, you're going to be put somewhere by the gangs.
But the
Muslims,
yeah,
there was very few Muslims. When I got moved to max security and I was upstairs in the lockdown,
yeah,
I met like Saddam Hussein's pilot and all these various Muslims. Mm-hmm. And a Muslim even come into our pod And I had a Russian chess playing partner who was white, so he's white, who called out the ABs. He was like, you meth is sucking the brain out of the Yankee. It is the biggest weapon of destruction against the Yankee. No one ever, because they were on it all day long, and no one ever called him out for it, and he did.
Right.
So when this Muslim came in, he was like, look, he's a good guy. He's from the Balkan Peninsula. He's not a chomo. Let's have his back.
Child molester, which is a phrase I learned this weekend.
Let's have his back. You know,
Right.
he's a good guy, and we tried to have his back.
The Russian guy?
The Muslim from the Balkan Peninsula.
So he's a white Muslim.
Yeah, and he said, let him in.
Yeah.
So we let him in, but it didn't last. Because he's on the borderline, isn't he, of being accepted or not. And there's always people looking for people to target. So he ended up getting smashed everywhere he went.
By the whites?
Yeah. If you don't fit in, you're effed. By all sides.
So when you say Balkan Peninsula, he's either Bosnian or Albanian, I presume.
I don't know beyond Balkan Peninsula.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if he's Muslim and white, he's Albanian or Bosnian. So
the Russian tried to have his back and say, look, he's a good guy. Let's have him in the whites. And I agreed. And half of us agreed.
Did he say he would join the whites, or did he say no, I'm Muslim?
He was just praying that someone would accept him because he was terrified for his life.
So he can't appeal to Aryan Brotherhood and say, yes, I'm white, I'm with you. I'll work. No.
The Aryan Brotherhood decide whether you live or die.
Fucking hell. I'm so glad I never went to prison. I'm just going to be, every time I visit my sister, I'm just going to be good as gold when I go over there.
This is what's given me such an interesting story for people. If none of this had happened, like I'm thankful for it.
I'm fucking terrified by it.
It's the jail, Richard, because you asked about the violence.
Yeah.
When they're sentenced, they settle down. It's the anticipation anxiety of not being sentenced that causes mayhem in people's minds.
Yes.
Because that stress level is so high, they're looking to vent.
Yeah.
So there's violence every single day in the jail. Someone's head is getting smashed in.
In remand.
Someone's head is getting smashed in every single day. Teeth getting knocked out. I saw teeth get knocked out, bounced so many times on the floor. I saw a guy with his leg pointing in the completely wrong direction. There was a mentally old man who wouldn't stop rambling. I don't know what the gang did to him, but as I walked past him, blood just squirts out the back of his head. I was lucky that Wildman was arrested with me. And when the Italian mafia took over, they couldn't put Wildman in my cell, but they put Joey Crack. And this was before they'd met Wildman, before Wildman was coming in every day. They wanted to meet him first because Joey Crack's telling them all these stories about Wildman every night in my cell.
Joey Crack's Italian.
Joey Crack, yeah, half like New York Italian, feisty. So the Italians would come in my cell and they'd all line up and listen to Joey Crack stories. He was like a raconteur. And they were mostly Wildman stories because Joey Crack was on the streets with Wildman. Joey Crack was like a human walking drug test. If you took him somewhere, he'd just put the drugs in a needle and stick it in his neck and tell you whether it was good or not. He was really hardcore. So he's telling us all these stories about Wildman. And they're like, we got arranged to meet him.
Yeah.
And we arranged to meet him at Catholic Mass. Now, Bruno, who was one of the enforcers for the Italians, who saw my Banged Up Abroad episode 2 years ago in America, contacted me and he's like, I can't believe you're doing all this. And I've interviewed him 5-6 times on my channel.
Right.
So if anyone wants to watch that stuff, it all confirms the jail stuff with Bruno. So he's like, we've got to meet Wildman at Catholic Mass. So I'm sat here. Wildman's here. And he's, when he died, he's a big fella. When he died, he was 29.5 stone, 6'2". This little seat is not enough. Bruno's a massive guy. They're crushing me. And when they shook hands, the handshake was so powerful, I almost flew out of my seat. So this is Catholic Mass. The Italians are very religious.
Yeah.
And the priest is telling us that his mum is sick in hospital and will we pray for her?
Yeah.
And some of the Italians are crying. And then he comes and gives the communion. And the Italians all taking it very seriously. Wildman just spits the communion in his mouth as the priest's walking back, slaps it on his eye, and goes, I'm a pirate, look at me. He goes, you're all fucking sinners. I know every one of you are sinners and we're all going to effing hell, you fucking hypocrites. Look at me. And like Bruno's laughing, but some of the Italians are getting a bit like, oh, this is a bit offensive. Yeah. So then Wildman takes the communion off his eye and like it's a frisbee. He throws it at the priest like it's a frisbee. And by now, the whole room is watching. You literally got guys in the front row who are tattooed with Jesus and Mary.
Yeah.
And they're all watching this communion go, skims the roof, hits the priest in the back and falls on the floor. And the Italians had like this butler kind of guy, and he ran and grabbed it up before the priest could see it. Yeah. but I asked Bruno in one of the interviews, I said, what did you guys think of Wildman? Maniac. They said he was a one-man maniac, and they had love and respect for him, but he was so unpredictable, people just did not know what he was going to do next.
Yeah.
So my point being here, if I'd have been arrested on my own without him, God knows what would have happened. Because I was arrested with him, the ABs saw right away.
Yeah.
Because he had no fear of anyone.
Right.
He would go, I'll give you an example. When he went to Buckeye prison after he got sentenced after a year, they come up and do the charge check. And the head of the whites in that building.
The charge check is they want to know what's on your charge sheet to see if you're a child molester.
Yeah, and there's a heart check.
What's a heart check?
They'll test you to see if you've got heart. And if you're a weakie, they'll exploit you.
Okay.
Yeah, so they came up to him and said, what's your charges? And Wildman's like, I've had a long day, I'm going to sleep. And they're like, no, you don't understand, you have to tell us your charges. So he just knocked the guy out and went to sleep. And then they came back. They came back and said, we're going to find out who you are. You don't realise what you've just done.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And they came back and offered him that guy's job.
Really?
After they'd researched who he was.
Okay.
Because on the streets, he'd clicked up with the HA, he'd been invited to the clubhouse.
He clicked up with who?
Hell's Angels had invited him to the clubhouse.
Right.
When he went down to Mexico on the run, my mates told me if he behaves like he does in Arizona, down Mexico, Mexicans would kill him. When I went down to Mexico, cartel guys were running him around in military jeeps. And he
loved him.
He paved, they called him El Oso de Burr because of his fighting style. And he paved the way for us to smuggle drugs through Mexico without...
This is a lad from Widnes.
Yeah.
And he made friends with the cartel because he just nipped down to Mexico for a while.
He was on the run after blowing houses up and all kinds in Arizona. When he'd finished his prison time, the AB offered him the membership patch. And he said, my granddad fought the fucking Nazis in Germany. I ain't having your fucking patch.
What? What are you saying? How did they not kill him?
Because he'd been running the building for them for his entire prison. When he got that guy's job, he knocked out.
Yeah.
He was running the building for him. He had the youngsters under control. He was brewing hooch. He was running the gambling tables and making money for them. So he put all this work in for over the years for the AB. And they offered him the tattoo. And
he just said, stick it up your Nazi bum.
Yeah.
I've only got half an hour left, Shaun. I feel like I need a bit longer. So, okay, rewind here. You were...
Can I quickly tell you the story when Wildman tried to fight the Giants?
Go on.
We're in like a biker, stripper, pool hall place where everyone's on meth.
Yeah.
Now, whenever Wildman's red dots are going to kick in, he has one eyebrow stays completely flat.
Yeah.
And the other one goes completely...
pointed.
Up.
Yeah.
Vertical.
Yeah.
So I know what's going on in his head.
It's about to go off. The red dots are telling him.
Yeah. So a giant walks in to the pool club, literally like Andre the Giant. Not as built as Andre the Giant, like a skinnier version.
Yeah.
Like a meth head version.
Yeah.
But he's got the big chin and the snaggly teeth and everything.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, he has a genetic.
Yeah, he's got the giantitis, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And Wildman's eyebrow goes straight up.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, peace. For God's sake, please, not in here.
Yeah. I'm trying to enjoy my math here.
I'm just having a nice game of pool, you know, looking at the titty girls.
Yeah.
And he's going to cause mayhem.
Yeah.
He's been up for a week on crack and meth, smoking it. His eyes are this big. He looks like the devil. He's just completely bloodshot.
Yeah.
So there's no stopping him. Goes up to the giant, holds his hands out, grabs his hand.
Yeah.
My name's Peter. My name's whatever. And then he doesn't let go of the giant's hand. And he goes, if I were you, I'd be in the circus, you fucking freak. And the giant's looking down at him, and I'm like, and now everyone's starting to look. And I'm thinking, oh, shit. Giant goes, what did you just say? Wildman goes, you fucking heard me.
Yeah.
If I were you, I'd be in the circus, you fucking freak. Now the whole bar's watching. And there's a giant face looking down at this maniac with his eyes just completely blood red. And the giant's head is shaking. And Wildman's just holding his guy's hand like that. And in the end, they both just fucking calmed down. And the giant said, let's go outside and I'll show you my car. So I went outside with the giant. He had a specially made car where his seat was kind of in the back.
Right.
He was that tall.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation with him and he offered to come debt collecting with us. and we got his number, but we lost it. I couldn't believe I lost his number. Imagine if someone owed you money and you showed up with Wildman and a giant knocking on the door.
I know why they haven't made a film of your story. It's because there's too much in it. And there's too much of the audience to be like, this is not true. But the thing is, truth is stranger than fiction. Like, I know this is true. I 100% believe you. But if you showed it in a movie, the people watching the movie would be like, oh no, this is just mental. This is wild.
Well, there's so many people that were with me as well who've authenticated. Like, we've interviewed Bruno, we've interviewed Wildwoman.
Yeah.
When this documentary comes out with Sammy the Bull, they interview Skinner, the guy Wildman wanted to kill.
Yeah.
For the first time he's ever done an interview. The interview is Skinner's ex-missus.
Right.
They interview my cops for the first time.
Yeah.
So much is going to come out because certain rival podcasters put videos out to millions of people saying I've made all this up.
Right.
And I got a lot of shit from some people believing it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Especially the lad out of Scotland and this one-eyed guy down south.
You just wouldn't get away with it. You just wouldn't get away with it. There's no way.
When this documentary comes out, it's going to make these guys look like arseholes.
Have you ever done Russell Brand?
You know what? I've read all of Russell Brand's books.
Yeah.
I've watched him on True Geordie. I'm dedicated to watching his channel. And I would like to interview Russell Brand, and I would like to go on his channel as well.
I'd like to see you being interviewed by him. I'd like to see him on your channel. And one of the things that I picked up from your books, and I kind of got a little bit, because you're a good interviewer. So when you're interviewing people, you're focused on that person. But then every once in a while, I hear how important literature and philosophy is to you, and particularly Eastern philosophy. And I kind of think... Yeah. Speaking genuinely, I genuinely think your story is so mad that like a lot of people would just be overwhelmed by it. Yeah. But at the core, there's somebody who is in a place that they've no business being in, that they've kind of slipstreamed through karma and fate, and it's a hellscape. Like your stories of how you survived the cockroaches in prison, cocooning yourself in a shroud with a breathing hole. It's hell. Like your description, there's a thing I was going to read, we might not have time for it, of you trying to stop lads from breaking into your cell to smash your fucking face in. It's hell. And through all of that weirdness and bizarreness and violence and suffering and everything, at the end of it, you're left with a fascination with Eastern philosophy. How do you square that circle? What do you think that comes down to?
First off, I want to say the stuff with the cockroach, all this extreme stuff, was documented in real time through my blog, which is timestamped, and it's all out there if people want to check my journey through the jail. What's
the blog?
John's Jail Journal, JONS Jail Journal. The BBC ran it and The Guardian ran it, and they republished, those original blog entries. Yeah. I shouldn't tease people with that. It's extremely hot because it's Arizona. So it's like 40 degrees C even at night. You wrapped yourself in a sheet and completely covered yourself because there's cockroaches crawling over your body. You have to get used to it, yeah. So that gave me a nervous breakdown in the beginning, because when I arrived at max security, because not many people were cooperating in my case. In the Bulls case, 57, they all rolled over right away. So they pulled out every dirty trick in the book to try and break us down. And I got moved to max.
You got moved to max because they're pressuring you. Mm-hmm. You should have been in a low security or medium.
I was in medium first year, yeah.
What were you not doing? What did they want you to do that you wouldn't do?
They wanted us all to cooperate.
Which it's fairly normal in the American penal system, right? You're supposed to plea bargain or plea deal.
Plea bargain is not cooperation.
Oh, no?
No, 90% of the cases in Arizona are resolved through plea bargains.
Okay.
That's not cooperation. Cooperation is when you agree to
go... you inform.
Snitching.
They wanted you to snitch and you wouldn't. Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay.
They want everyone to snitch on everyone else. It's the domino theory.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in Sammy the Bull's case, all 57 rolled over right away.
And that's how they broke the American Mafia in the end, wasn't it?
I'm on about his ecstasy case.
Okay.
That wasn't Mafia. That was supremacists and jocks. Okay. So in my case, because we'd been together for years and were so bonded, nobody was snitching.
Okay.
So a year in, they're like, right, we're going to put even more pressure on Attwood now. They doubled my charges, doubled my bail, which made me automatically maximum security, which took me away from my friends in medium security.
Okay, that's confusing for me. That's not how the British penal system works. So because they doubled your bail, the level of security of prison you go to...
Jail.
Jail goes up.
Yeah. And then they charged my girlfriend with one prescription pill found in our medicine cabinet without a written prescription right next to it, which is Class 6 felony. Co-defendants can't visit co-defendants, so they stopped my girlfriend from visiting me in the second year as well.
Right.
These are all the snidey tricks they pulled.
Yeah.
So I get moved over to Max, 2 a.m. It's dark. There's a light coming in from the day room. I see my cellmate shrouded on the top bunk. I think that's weird because people fight over the bottom bunk. Walking up and down in the cellar, pacing. Something drops off the ceiling and bounces off my shoulder. What the hell was that? I think my eyes are playing tricks because I can see movement on the walls. So I put my face up to the walls and it's covered in American cockroaches.
Jesus Christ.
And then I examine my bunk and the bracket, there's a hole at the bracket and they're just spilling out onto my bunk.
Crawling on your bed?
On my bunk, yeah. So how on earth am I going to sleep now? So for days I can't get to sleep, and then they put me on something to help me get to sleep.
What were you trying to do? Were you trying to brush them off?
So I'm lying on the bunk, looking at them on the wall and at the bracket coming onto the bunk.
Yeah.
And then I'm turning over, so don't look at them, trying to shield myself with the sheet. When you put the sheet around you completely, which is what you have to do, and leave a breathing hole, because this is the Sonoran Desert, in our temperature scale, it's like almost 50 degrees. There's no air coming in. Swamp cooler. Only time that was working was when the county health inspector walked through the building, and it goes back to the broken setting. So we're covered in skin infections and bed sores from the heat. Your skin starts to turn soggy after so many days of sweating constantly. So you get itchy, you scratch yourself, clumps of your skin comes off under your nails. So when you put the sheet around you to protect you from the cockroaches, it irritates the skin so much. You can't, it looked like I spilled battery acid on my leg. So you throw the sheet off and then they crawl on you. They start out tickling your feet. To this day, if Jen tries to tickle my hands, I think she does it on purpose sometimes. I'm like that because I just have flashbacks to the amount of times that I woke up with them. They'd be tickling my hands. They get on your face, nose, mouth, but the favourite place of all is going in your ears to eat your earwax. It's like honey.
Fucking hell, lad. I
had a neighbour who was asthmatic, wakes up one morning out of breath, grabs his inhaler, takes a blast, shoots a live cockroach inside himself, starts freaking out saying he can feel it moving around and he's throwing up and he can't get it out. Even in the daytime, there were so many, the prisoners were doing cockroach races on the day room tables, gambling on the winner.
So when I say hell, this is on top of fear of getting smashed, fear of rape. You've seen other people having their heads bashed in for infractions of whatever the crazy, petty prison rules are that day.
One guy got murdered because he refused to beat someone up for the gang, and I put that video on my channel as well.
This was a race thing, was it?
It was a white guy who refused to beat someone up for the gang. Most violence, Richard, is within the race.
Okay.
They don't want inter-race violence.
They have intra-race violence.
Because if white and a black guy have a beef, the heads say, you guys go in that cell and fight it out.
Yeah.
If people start jumping in, there's a race fight, the drugs business gets shut down. The absolute priority of the gang is the drugs business. They've got the staff bringing it in.
Yeah.
They're making massive amounts of money.
Yeah.
If it gets locked down, all that gets stopped.
On a much smaller scale, in a much pettier way, you see the same thing with door security. Intra-racial violence is common. Interracial violence is kind of still a bit of a taboo.
Yeah.
So when I used to work at the door in New Zealand, I worked for a Maori firm, and they had Samoans and Maoris working together. If lads came to the door, if it was brown, they'd put me at the front. And if it was white, we'd put brown at the front. Because there's just you still fight, there'll still be violence, but there's a little bit more respect when it's interracial. You don't, it's contempt, isn't it? It's like, you're white, I'm white, fuck you. Or you're Samoan, I'm Samoan. Or Tongan versus Maori, fuck you. Whereas white, there's still a little bit. And I think it's almost like an instinctual thing. We don't want this to go off. We don't want this to go really horribly wrong.
The whites have to discipline the whites.
Right.
That's where the violence comes from.
Right. That's how I felt. I instinctively felt that way. And I'd be like, we were doing like unlicensed boxing security. And if there was a white problem and they tried to solve it, some instinctual thing, we'd be like, no.
Yeah.
I deal with this. Yeah. And I'm not that way inclined.
Yeah.
Just kicked in the moment. So he refused to batter somebody, and did they deliberately murder him, or do you think they just got excited?
Yeah, he was deliberately murdered. Now, this is one that
Fucking
I
hell.
put on my channel. It's not one that I saw in person, but it happened around the time I was there. It was in max security. So there was like this kangaroo court thing, and the guy goes up into his cell, and he thinks he's okay. The guy was about to get murdered. Peter Van Winkle, a AB member, goes up to the cell and starts smashing his head into the floor. And he's looking at the security camera, thinking that they're going to pounce on him. The guards are going to come running in. 10 minutes later, they've still not come in.
Right.
So he's stomping on his head and neck. And then he's dead.
Shit.
20 minutes later, he's looking at the camera. Where are you guys?
Yeah.
So he grabs the body, walks to the balcony where the camera is, like that,
Yeah.
tries to throw the body off the balcony.
Yeah.
It gets stuck on the railing, and he starts kicking the shit out of it. And he gets sentenced to death because he did it on camera.
And he did that because this guy refused.
To beat someone up for the Aryan Brotherhood.
Was he a lifer anyway? Why?
I can't remember I think he was doing a long one. But death penalty.
Yeah. Fucking hell, man. So you're involved with these people because the system is trying to get you to inform. They're trying to break the ring completely. And so they're trying to get you to inform. And so they're pushing you into max, because you wouldn't see that in a medium.
In my remand, because I am not cooperating, I'm not agreeing to testify or snitch or anything.
Yeah.
They are putting more and more pressure on me and my co-defendants to cooperate.
Do you think this qualifies as torture?
Yeah, but I asked my lawyer about it, and prosecutors have got absolute immunity. They can do what the hell they want. I mean, the amount of illegal things I thought were illegal, and my lawyer's just saying, we can file this, we can file that, but nothing's going to happen. They're protected.
Do you consider the American prison system, as is in maximum security, do you consider that to be a form of psychological torture?
Yes. Psychological torture. They use heat as torture. They use food as torture. So it's psychological and physical.
Are you for prison now, or are you against it?
Prisons should house people who harm other people.
Okay.
And this is how crime has been defined for millennia.
Yep.
Pedophiles, rapists, murderers, especially people who harm women or kids. That should be the absolute priority of the cops and the justice system.
Okay.
What we've seen is the complete opposite. At the height of the war on drugs, I've written 5 books deconstructing mass incarceration, the war on drugs. You had 1 million arrests a year for weed possession.
Yeah.
Every kid they snatched, the prisons got $60,000 a year of taxpayers' money per person.
Yeah.
So by allowing it to be what I've described in my books, drug and gang-infested mayhem, to give them $50 on the gate when they get released, they know they're coming right back. As soon as they come back, $60,000 per year of taxpayers' money. You put a pothead in prison, he becomes a neo-Nazi heroin addict with a criminal record. What chance has he got? He's a client for life for the system.
Talk about the racial element to that. I've heard you say that you think that it's particularly skewed against the black population in America.
Oh, yeah.
How is it, and why is it?
All right, they go after the poorest communities. I saw one cop say, to make my arrest quotas, I just go into the black neighborhood. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. Sadly, many black communities are poorer than white communities. And you've got, in white communities, prosecutors, judges, you got access to resources. So if your kid gets arrested, you're not just going to roll over and get on the conveyor belt from the remand jail to the prison system. You're going to fight the system. It's easier if you're reducing human beings to commodities in warehouses where they're just in these big dorms, to go after the poorest sections of society. And it was primarily just black people in prison.
Right.
At one point. I mean, one prison guard said to me in Sheriff Joe Arpaio's jail, pity you didn't commit your crimes in Chicago. We only arrest blacks in Chicago. But the system has got so big.
That's like a semi-ironic joke. It's got an element of truth to it, you think?
I think it was true.
Yeah.
But the prison system has got so big, it's had to start feeding off all races to keep it employed. The justice system in America is now one of the biggest employers in the world.
So this is like peak capitalism, almost.
It's capitalism gone evil. You've got people on death row getting executed so prosecutors can get advances in their careers when they know they're innocent, and they're killing people intentionally. My lawyer got one off death row that was within hours of getting executed. He was called the Snaggletooth Killer. A waitress was found dead at a bar. He'd been in the bar. His name's Ray Crone. People can research this. Bite mark and DNA don't match Ray, but they get Ray in because he's been at the bar. He's the easiest one.
Yeah.
Ray was with his mum that night when this woman was getting murdered. They pay an expert witness $50,000 to say his teeth matched, and they give Ray $5,000 to defend himself. I know from going court every month that court is theatre. I couldn't say anything. Prosecutors saying I'm the Antichrist. My prosecutors, my lawyers saying I'm a child protege, stock wizard gone wrong. The truth was somewhere in between.
Yeah.
But it's theatre. So Ray Crone's got 5,000 for his theatre show. State of Arizona's got millions. Who's going to win that theatre show? He's found guilty. His mum almost has a heart attack in the courtroom. For 10 years, Ray is fighting and he's getting stays of execution. My lawyer, through the federal court system, forced the state of Arizona to release the DNA. Didn't want to release it because it proved his innocence. They had suppressed it. He had to go to court. Federal judge ordered its release. It was run through a crime lab and it matched the predator who was incarcerated and he confessed to the crime. It could have been solved like that. But if they'd have executed him, they would have still looked like their jobs would be intact, their reputation. They promised the victims' family members they got the right guy. They don't have to pay out compensation. They wanted to get him out of the picture by executing him. This is how they've got bigger psychopaths in the justice system, working in the justice system than the kids and the young people and the mentally ill and the poor people who were in the prison system. And early on in my incarceration, a guy said to me, these are the innocents. And I thought, these aren't the innocents. These are all of the crooks that have done shit. I had no idea what he meant until it evolved that they started telling the stories. Why were they in there in the first place? They were victims of paedophiles. They'd seen their parents murdered. They were thrown away onto the streets as kids. Childhood trauma, we've learned through our podcast interviews and through speaking to people living with heroin users for 6 years, hardcore heroin users, 90% of them in some areas I was living. Childhood trauma is the root cause of crime. And then they don't get any help, so they get onto the heroin to deal with it, and then the criminality, and they all end up in prison.
Speaking of drugs. I had a little brush with this element of the American penal system as theatre. I was asked to be an expert witness on two cases. One was the Menendez brothers. Do you remember the Menendez case?
Yeah, Matthew Steeples, who is one of our co-hosts and guests, he does stuff on them. It
was not the original case because I was a kid when that came out, but the girlfriend of one of the brothers tried to take it back to court and she wanted me to get involved to say that because of psychopathic abuse, that would justify shooting your parents. And I was like, I'm not going to say that because it's not true. And the other one was the case. The guy who did the shooting was George Martinez. There was he followed a young black kid that was in Florida where there's a stand of ground law. He followed him because he thought he was looking in houses. They get into a fight. The kid gets on top of him and he shoots him. And they wanted me on that case and they were like, oh, we want you as an expert witness as an MMA instructor, which I wasn't. I was like, I'm not an MMA instructor for a start, but I want you to say that this position is so stressful and so dangerous it would justify shooting somebody in the guts. And I was like, I'm not fucking doing that either. For both cases, I'm just a YouTuber. They're trying to recruit me as an expert witness when my qualification is I have a degree in psychology and a YouTube channel. Do you think that should be legal, or do you think that's something that's...
It's so common now, it's called testy lying.
Really?
Yeah.
It has a term.
They'll pay an expert... They've got expert witnesses for both sides who'll say whatever they want.
Right.
You've got crime labs now talking to the prosecutors and saying, what DNA results do you want?
Wow.
This is how corrupt the American justice system is. And in response to the Menendez thing, Matthew Steeples, who's working on Menendez, he does believe that they suffered horrific childhood trauma at the hand of the dad, I think it was.
The father, yeah. I believe it. I just was like, I'm never going to publicly state that the shooting was justified as a result and it wasn't that she was offering me money. It was like, there was a documentary and stuff like that. I just said, I can't say what you want me to say in the way that you want me to say it. And the idea was to present a documentary, then that would develop into a case, and then I would be an expert witness in the case to say, oh, he should be released. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm sure they were abused, but they killed both parents with shotguns.
Yeah,
right?
something like that.
Shotgunned them to death. Tell me about the importance of literature in your experience of surviving this hellscape.
So before the SWAT team, all I read was finance books. And I thought I knew everything. Ego as big as the Grand Canyon. And then people start like telling me to read in the jail. And I'm like, oh, fiction's frivolous. What can I learn from fiction? And two of the first books that were given me in my first year were 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World.
Great.
So now we've got the party scene in Huxley that I relate to. We've got the totalitarian Orwellian conditions in 1984, which I'm thinking this is my environment I'm in. I started getting really engaged. So the prisoners, I learned that the prisoners had a library allowance whereby you filled out what was called a tank order, a form, and you could just select categories like history, war, philosophy, fiction, and it was like a lucky lottery, really. So I started buying the library allowances off the other prisoners for some commissary.
Yeah.
And because I never knew what was going to, it was so exciting, when the books finally came, this one's lame, this one's good. But over the 6-year period, I went on this fantastic journey through literature, managed to read over 1,000 books in just under 6 years.
Wow.
In 2006, I read 268 books. I was writing them all down by this point and rating them. And I told my sister, I've just read 268 books in the last year. And she was like, you lucky bastard. She's got a degree in classical French literature.
Right.
She's like, to do that, you've got to have, people have lives, jobs, responsibilities.
Yeah.
You've got to be living like a mad monk in a cave to do that. And that's exactly what I am.
Yeah.
But I started to read textbooks on philosophy and psychology, and the same names kept coming up: Freud, Jung, Erikson, Nietzsche. And I started to notice in some textbooks they say one thing about them, and another textbook they say the completely opposite. So I thought, I need to read the originals. So I read all the originals, Nietzsche, Freud, Jung, and I realized that every textbook, it was just that author's interpretation of what this person was trying to say.
Yeah.
And everyone's got a different interpretation. Now, when I took this to the therapist in prison time, and he's saying, it's great you're reading all this stuff, but what can you actually use in your life? What I want us to do, Shaun, from now on is to bring quotes in and we'll discuss them for the practical application in your life.
I was a smart therapist.
Yeah, and things like Epictetus is particularly applicable to prison because Epictetus says we're disturbed not by what's happening around us, but by our reaction to it, which we can control through our thoughts. So people who are getting picked on the most in the prison are the ones reacting the most.
Yeah.
But they have control over that. They can choose a different way to react and not become these victims. And to this day, if something's going on around me, he taught me about having yardsticks. If, for example, one day I woke up and I was publishing a book and my internet was down. I could feel my blood pressure rising. And then I remembered what the therapist told me, think about the worst things you've ever gone through in your life. Holy shit, I went 6 years without internet.
Yeah.
And here I am.
Having a fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's helped me get my anxiety under control and give me tools to deal with life. And I wish I could thank him. And I've tried to find him online and I've found details, but I've reached out and got no proper response or contact details back because I want to thank him for reshaping my brain.
Sometimes the best therapists that are out there are the worst users of the internet. They really don't even read their email. They don't anything. Eastern philosophy you've got an interest in as well.
Yeah.
And did that develop in prison time?
So when I was in the gang-infested Towers jail first year, sister sent me a book, Yoga Made Easy by Howard Kent. And I hid it under the mattress. I didn't want the fellas to see it and think I'm a sissy and smash me. But my sister's on my case. Have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? Have you read it yet? I thought, right, when my cellmates go downstairs, I'm going to bust the book out, do the positions real quick. Tell my sister I hated it, but at least I've tried it. So I waited till my cellies went downstairs, got the book out. It was a basic sequence of postures. Forward bend, side bend, spinal twist, cat, dog. And in the end, you lay down in corpse pose, flatten your back, close your eyes. And as I laid down in corpse pose, I felt all the stress and tension just melting out my shoulders and my body. And just felt warm and fuzzy, like I was on E. And I thought, I used to pay to feel like this, and you could do it naturally.
Yeah.
So then I threw myself into it. Now, when I ended up with the cockroaches, they doubled my charges, told me I was facing 200 years. I thought my life was over and I was on the verge of killing myself. I planned to kill myself after a guard did a security walk. I was just going to bleed out. Before I was going to do it, I wanted to say goodbye to my family and friends. What I mean by that was I had 7 photos. That was what was allowed. So get the photos out of my mum, dad, girlfriend, sister. And I'm thinking my mum's going to get a call saying your son's dead in a foreign prison. I started crying and I couldn't bear the thought I put my mum through that. But there was a chapter in Yoga Made Easy about meditation. I thought, right, I need to start trying this meditation. And my cellmate at the time was a crystal meth chemist who'd converted to the Hindu religion. And he was into meditation. So because there was cockroaches everywhere at night when it was quiet, I stacked some books up, tucked my pink socks into my black and white striped outfit so the cockroaches could crawl on me, but they couldn't get on my skin. I'm in the cross-legged position like this, but not touching the wall because they were all running around the wall behind me. I just closed my eyes and it said, like, count your breathing. And I was counting my breathing, I kept breathing and trying to get the thoughts to stop. And the thoughts wouldn't stop. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. You can't get your thoughts to stop. That's not even possible. So in the end, because I've got this manic energy that I throw into things, I started just doing it longer and longer every night. And my cellmate was encouraging me. And in the beginning, the thoughts would stop for a little bit and the thoughts would stop for a little bit. And then the thoughts started to completely stop. And then visuals just started to come in and I can see them now. And I would just go. And I was like, I was just gone somewhere else. I didn't know how long I was sat there for. And I'd eventually come out of it. And the meditation got my stress level so down, I was able to stop the medication for not being able to sleep because the cockroaches were crawling on me.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you could sleep without medication?
Yeah.
I read you were doing like visualizations where you'd visualize yourself in different shapes and different places. And
yeah.
Yeah.
So I would see my spine as a rod and then the light would just increase around me, this field, or you'd be breathing and as you're breathing in, you're seeing light go down the rod one way and then turning around, your base chakra and then going up the other way. There was so many different meditations. I can't remember them all.
Yeah.
There was a book, Bo Lozoff, I think his name was, that I got a lot of it out of. It was like meditations for prisoners or something like that.
And it helped a lot. And for that time.
There are holistic ways to deal with things I learned. Yeah.
Because even now you prefer or you're a proponent of natural methodologies for healing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Physical issues, right?
Yeah, people want shortcuts. And the pharmaceutical industry's just got everyone hooked.
What, you came out and you were teaching kids or you were doing talks to kids in schools. This was presumably to keep them out of prison and keep them away from crime.
Yeah, I just did one last week. So I just go in, scare the living daylights out of them from the stories of hard time in summarized version, the cockroaches, the gangs, the dead rats in the food, the Red Death, the mystery meat slop, the heat, and in the hope they won't get involved in drugs and crime.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, the first one I did, how this came about was when I got released, I did some Radio 4 interview with Eddie Murr, and a Harley Street drug counsellor heard it, and he contacted and got my details and said, would you come and do talks in schools? Now, I was institutionalised, and I thought, I got to get my head straight. I told him. They said, well, come and watch me do one. I went and watched him do one. It was about a year before I said I felt like I could do one. I mean, if people look at the video of me at the airport, I'm stubbled out and shell-shocked. You can see I've been through some things. I'm a mess. So it was a year later that I did my first one. And my adrenaline spiked so high. the teacher later described me as being like a lion in the cage. At the front of the room, I just paced furiously from side to side, just striding fiercely and furiously with this soaked in sweat, with all this energy just crackling off me.
Yeah.
And
you were scared of talking to these kids?
No, I loved it.
Oh, you loved it, yeah?
But it was. I had to research it later, and they said when you face an audience, it goes back to the caveman days that if there's 100 people in one, they're coming to eat you, basically. Right. So your adrenals kick in.
Yeah.
So there was that. There was the excitement of doing work, because I hadn't done work. There was wondering whether they were, like, what they were thinking of it, that reaction. There was a lot going on. Yeah. There was a lot going on. So I'm this character at the front, just crackling. And they asked loads of questions, and I'm realizing that, you know, they're engaged. And over time, because I went back to that school every year, they voted it the best talk of the year. I went back every year.
Don't bring that psycho back.
But by the end of it, I was just at the front, talking like I talk now. Yeah, I wasn't this lion in the cage.
Yeah.
And he said he preferred it when I was the lion in the cage.
They wanted the lunatic. Well, we're coming to the end of it. What? I've got to have you back on again. What would you say was the biggest takeaway that you got from what was a fairly fucking horrendous? I'm sure it was exciting and had its peaks, but it's a fairly horrendous experience. What did you take from that?
The one that saved my life, Richard, was even though I'd met a woman and quit the importation a year before the SWAT team came, I'd not stopped my personal use, which was hardcore. I was at the point where I was going out and doing club drug cocktails and passing out on GHB. And I tell my mates, you know, if I pass out, don't call an ambulance, just let me, I'll be flopping on the floor like a fish. And it was messy. And when the SWAT team came, and I'm living with people now who are in the deep end of drug use, 90% injecting, smoking meth. I never, other than doing that hot rails, you know, a couple of times in my life, I've never smoked anything. And I saw the road of drug use. I thought, right, I started here as a uni student, raving. I'm halfway down that road now where I'm hammering all these drugs. These guys are intravenous, yellow jaundice skin, teeth rotting out, hepatitis C. Do I want to keep going down that road and ending up like that? And I also was ashamed of putting people on that road because I realized drugs had put a cloud in my head that had been there for 10 plus years that had scrambled my decision-making processes. I was just telling myself I was keeping the party going, but I was actually putting people on the road of drug use that ends here. So I was ashamed, and that's why I resolved to go out and share my story. But talking to the prisoners and learning about that trajectory, reading the philosophy, reading the psychology, having the therapist, being forced from a sober perspective to go deep inside myself and not only address the root causes, because you're not going to address them. You're not going to fix it until you address them. You've got to go down there, and people are afraid to go down there. They don't want to look at what's hurting them. Yeah. So they self-medicate. So that's part of the process. And then the therapist put in a framework in my head, these circuit breakers, that when situations do arise around me, I'll fall back on what he said. When I got released and go back to witness, and Hammy's taking me to pubs, Wildman's cousin, and lads are coming up to me in the toilet, trying to shove cocaine up my nose, saying, "We know about you and your story." They're buzzing, and they're just trying to shove cocaine up my nose. And then thinking about everything I've been taught the past 6 years, to not go back to it, I credit that with saving my life, because it would have been very easy to go back to it. And I think if I hadn't got arrested, I might have well ended up dead, because I was in the character I was hanging out with. Most of the men, most of my closest friends are dead. Yeah. The male ones. Yeah. The guy who hooked me up with the ecstasy in the very beginning in Arizona, a guy called Acid Joey, loved him. He was a brilliant dancer, stocky guy, Native American, was found dead in his swimming pool with all of his clothes on. Wildman died just over 2 years ago from multiple organ failure. When he went into prison, he had to put a stent in his heart because of all the damage he'd done through his drug use. One of my guys, the prophet, Jerry Hoey, he took a Xanax. He was walking along, passed out. His head hit the corner of a coffee table and he died. Big Micah, one of my bouncers, he got caught dealing meth over federal lines to a different state. Went in the prison over there. They diagnosed him with stomach cancer. They don't pay to treat you because it eats into their profits. So he just died from the stomach cancer. Tucson Charlie put a gun in his mouth and blew his brains out. His dad had done the same. A guy, one of my closest guys, I could show you the message on my phone if you want. I just got a text 3 days ago from one of my co-defendants, Andrea. He'd moved to Costa Rica and he was doing great. He was throwing festivals. And he had a seizure on the beach, and his corpse was found on the beach. This was just like 3 or 4 days ago. And this is what I tell the kids. Drugs starts out fun at first, but you're constantly chasing those early highs. The pleasure's going down slowly, and the side effects is rising. So you move on to harder drugs, or you mix your drugs up. And if you've done enough damage, there's a reason there's no old drug users out there. They're either dead or in prison.
Yeah.
And most of my male friends have gone that way. They're dead. Yeah.
A sobering thought to end with, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Have a hug.
Okay.
Yeah. Cheers, Richard. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Brilliant.
Ladies and gents, thank you very much for tuning in. You can find Shaun over on his channel, which is Shaun Attwood.
Yeah, everything's under my name, ShaunAttwood, my YouTube channel, all the books, all my socials.
I recommend these books. It's not an easy read, but it's well worth having a look at. Some of it is frightening and disturbing, but it is an insight into a whole other reality. Thanks very much, mate. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, I'd love to. Cheers.
Thanks, folks. I'll speak to you soon.